So, Mohammed, I would then kindly ask you to present your work for about half an hour, and then you will have some questions from your committee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis, for the introduction. So I would like to present my work on visual data analysis supported by eye tracking, multi-touch displays, and machine learning as a joint PhD program of NTU and TU Graz. So these days we are encountering a lot of data. You can see cases, if, for example, Industry 4, in the healthcare, and these data come in different factors. For example, they can be like multivariate data sets, they can be time series, and there are currently two fields that are emerging. One is information visualization. The other one is machine learning. And together with these two fields, we can empower the analyst to decode this data and make decisions out of them. So I mentioned multivariate data set, but I mean tabular data. For example, here you see a table of countries data set with 4 countries involved: Austria, Bangladesh, Iran, and Singapore. You can see the attributes of them in columns, for example, GDP, population. And you can label these data as classes. For example, Austria is a high-income country, whereas Bangladesh is a lower middle-income country. You can imagine sometimes the labels are not available. You can show these multivariate datasets with different forms or different visualization views. Here you see a multiple link visualization software that visualizes a 12 dimensions data in different forms. For example, on the middle top, you see a scatter plot, which we are familiar with. 2 dimensions you choose, you put it there. On the right, it is a similarity map. You reduce your dimensions to 2 again with some algorithms, and you show your data. On the left, you see your scatter plot matrix, which you see all the bivariate variations of your dataset. And on the lower side, you see power coordinates, where you put all the dimensions instead of horizontally, vertically, and you show each record by a line, starting from the first axis, going all the way to the last. Information visualization is the use of context-supported interactive visual representation of abstract data to amplify cognition. This is the typical or the traditional definition of information visualization, and the information visualization pipeline. You see it starts from raw data, go all the way to views, and the user can interact through these different stages by view transformation, visual mapping, and data transformation. So human interaction is half of the work here. I mentioned another field is machine learning. In machine learning, what you want to always do to build a model. This model, for example, can be represented as a file or a mathematical model, for example, a classifier model. I will give you an example. For example, imagine in our country's data set, you have 50 countries that are labeled and 50 that are not. You can, with some mathematical algorithms, you can build a classifier with this labeled data and predict what are the classes of the other 50 countries. So machine learning techniques basically can be categorized into 3 things: supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement learning. Here we focus on supervised and unsupervised, sometimes semi-supervised. As an example of supervised, you have classification techniques, which you always want to identify a record belongs to which class. And then you have your clustering techniques, in which you want to group records together. And the thing is, here you don't have any available label. In the visual analytics cycle, which starts from data, goes to visualization and models, and create knowledge, we want to focus on this cycle between visualization and machine learning models. We want to use visualization and user interactions to refine the parameters of models. We want to visualize our models, and we want to create our models using interactive visualization. And this is helpful for 3 things: for quality assurance, for building models, and for parameter optimization. We want to answer 4 questions in this thesis. or in this presentation. You want to see if you can use interactive visualization for exploring the models. You can use them to create the models. We want to see if we can compare them to traditional machine learning algorithms. And further, we want to see if you can use novel interaction techniques or multimodal interaction to explore these models. There are two main works that inspired me and all the co-authors here. The first one is called Regression Lens by Lin Shao. So what Regression Lens does is that you can select and explore local patterns in a scatterplot matrix. You can, in a scatterplot space, you can choose your scatterplot that you want to explore. You can create a lens. It shows the local regression there, and you can compare them and do further work. The other work I would like to mention is the interactive visual labeling done by Jürgen Bernard. It is a concept that you want to interactively label your data visually. So for example, here you see two players, Buffon and Manuel Neuer, and there is a similarity scale between them. The user rate the similarity of these two candidates, and based on that, a classifier is built, and the user can see the similarities of other players based on this model that is created. So as I mentioned, the first question was to how to use visual analytics to find structures in the machine learning model. Here we are focusing on a specific thing which is called local pattern. So a pattern is defined as few or a lot of records together that are enclosed in a bounding box. For example, on the left, you see a global pattern, on the right, you see a local pattern. A global pattern always consists of all records in a scatter plot or in the dataset. And there are hidden information in these local patterns, and you can use these analytics tools to find redundant attributes and find local relationship in data. We defined an approach that always starts from selection of region of interest, which is a local pattern. You can search for these patterns, and this search is done through some machine learning, through some descriptors, regressions, and you visualize these local patterns that are similar in the whole scatterplot space. There's a relevance feedback that you can refine the parameters in your model, and you do the search again. Here we see an example as a video. If, for example, the user selects one scatter plot here, then chooses a local pattern, then search for similar ones. Then, as you can see, he selects like 4 that are more similar, refines the search, and can do it again. The second question that we ask is how we can use visual analytics to build a machine learning model. We are sometimes encountering a data set that we don't know the characteristic of it. There is no label data available, and we don't even know the label alphabet. For example, we don't know if what's the name of the categories, or what categories even exist, or how many of them exist. The only solution that comes to our mind is that we have an interactive visual approach to guide the user to do this labeling and to build a classifier out of them. So imagine you have a pool of unlabeled datasets. You can create and edit partitions through clustering, classification, or active learning, and build your classifier. And you can run this cycle however you want, or with any number of times that you want. This is the system that we designed and built to do this task. It's called MVis, which is for multivariate visualization. In the first, second, and fifth view, you see the typical things that I talked about. The fourth view is the label view. You can create your labels there and do classification and clustering or active learning and refine your parameters. And the third view is a similarity map view that is show abstractions of all your clusters or all your categories. To go a bit into details of visualization, for example, in the A, you see if if it's a scatter plot, a portion of a scatter plot view of a data set, the red triangles are the ones that are not labeled. The blue and green are labeled. And when you go to the B, you have already one clustering algorithm with 3 clusters, and you see some hollow circles in purple, I think yellow and orange. And on the C, you have run a classification algorithm, and some of your records are classified, but you didn't approve them yet, so they're still hollow. You can approve them and make them solid. And on the last one, the same thing happens with active learning. I would like to give you an example. Imagine you have a football players data set. You have a lot of players that have different attributes, for example, goals, assists, clearance, and they have labels based on their positions on the field. Here, the user is working on this data set. The user is selecting players that did a lot of goals and a lot of assists and label them as superstars. Then select players that were very inactive in the game and call them as bench. There's another feature here that you've seen on the bottom. I clicked on few dimensions. So for example, when you want to run your classification or clustering, you can always include all the dimensions, or you can just include some of them. And here we automatically select them for you, and you can then manually refine them. Then you see that the user is performing clustering with 2 different algorithms, hierarchical. Now it's hierarchical, it's not happy with them, deletes all the clusters, runs another one, disapprove 2 or 3 of them, and approves 1 of them. And you can do the same thing with classification and active learning. And the result is a built model with label data. We did 2 case studies for this tool. In one of them, scientists with 718 records dataset and 10 dimensions, which was representing user activities, tested this dataset, found new patterns among users and dimensions, verified her observations, and mentions to us that the dimensions that she were able to create were really meaningful. In the second user study, there was over 400 records and 25 dimensions that were for activities, but not online activities, for real activities. For example, running, walking, standing. And what the user was very interested in was to identify correlations between dimensions and partitions, see which partition is correlated to what dimension. And with MVs, he was able to do so. So I asked the second question in the beginning, the third question, sorry. The third question is how now we can see if visual artists can be compared to active learning or not, if it's even beneficial in terms of accuracy, for example. First, I would like to talk about what is active learning. Active learning is a process or a set of algorithms that instead of, imagine you have a data set, you can just randomly start to label some of the data, right? The better approach is that the algorithm selects the ones that are more important or more ambiguous and give it to you, and you label them. And the goal is always to have a better accuracy. So for example, it's like labeling 100 labels, you have the same accuracy in your classifier as you have with 200 random records to label. We want to answer 4 questions. We want to see the 3 views that I talked about, the scatterplot matrices, scatterplots, and power coordinates, how we can compare them if we want to perform interactive labeling on them, how we can compare them with active learning. And the third question is like how we can compare the 3 visualizations in terms of user experience and confidence. And as last, we want to see if the user perform different strategies in these 3 different datasets, 3 different views, sorry. So we designed a study with 10 users and we ran it. The study was run on 2 datasets, MNIST and World Bank dataset. The World Bank dataset is the one that I talked about countries, and the MNIST is a famous dataset for images. And we ran it in 2 different versions with 2 numbers and with 4 numbers. we gave the user a tutorial on the MNIST2 versions. And on the test sessions, with the 6 conditions, we gave these 3 views, all of them in the World Bank dataset and all of them in the MNIST dataset. And we did an interview with them. Also, the users were encouraged to think aloud. Each study took place about an hour and a half sometimes. This is the view. So we used envies for labeling. The only difference is that when you were clicking on any point or any record in any view, you were able to label your data set. And here, instead of actually labeling them, we're just asking if this label is correct or not, because we didn't want to have any wrong label. This is the result for comparing these 3 different visualizations together. You see 5 lines here. The black one is the random selection, which means you just randomly select a point. The green one is the greedy selection, which means that this is the best case scenario, that you run exactly the best classifier that you can. You always choose the best record to label at each step. And you can see the other 3 visualizations. You have your step numbers as the x-axis, accuracy on the right axis. And the active learning models were smallest margin, entropy-based sampling, and with significant confidence. As you can see, the similarity map is performing better in both datasets. Here, there's another line, which is the red line. The red line is the average or median. It's the median. It's the median of active learning algorithm, the 3 ones that I mentioned. And sometimes you see it is performing worse than the random selection. The main reason is because it is just 30 samples, and they may suffer from bootstrap problems, which means in the beginning they don't perform good, and as time continues, the number of steps, they perform better. As you can see, at the end, they're almost surpassing the random selections. But our observation is that at least in this phase of labeling the datasets, the visual interactive is performing better. It is very obvious, for example, in the similarity map, not so obvious in power coordinates, but statistically it is still significant. The mean rating given by the users, we gave them a questionnaire to fill, and they kind of chose similarity map is better for labeling experience and selection confidence. The only thing that was significantly statistically significant here was that similarity map is good for labeling experience and selection confidence. But you can't really compare power coordinates and SPLOM, at least in the samples that we have with 10 users. So the result was that similarity map is performing better, but all of these views can perform better than active learning, at least in these 2 data sets that we tested. And it is very obvious that putting the user in the loop is a good approach for creating a training data set. And for the last part, we focused on interaction. We wanted to see if we can use novel interactions for data analytics. The whole motivation is that interaction is half of the job. So if we can improve that half of the job, is it better for exploring machine learning models? And can we use them for creating models or gather more information from the user? I will show you a few examples that we worked on, and we did a prototype, and we showed that we can use novel interaction techniques for model exploration. For example, in the first case, you see a single user is working on a screen. A multi-touch, vertically mounted multi-touch display selects these local patterns for regression analysis. And there is a menu, so she can use her other hand to, for example, change the regression degree. And this is the extended version of it with 2 users involved. showing that this kind of approach can be beneficial if two users in a small team want to collaborate with each other. You can see they are talking about regression lens, and there is one feature that we added that you can see the regression lens of the other person in your own lens. And our estimation is that it can help them to look less on the other person regression model. The other scenario is that you have a meeting around the table or around the display, and there's one person presenting, and there are more than two people involved. In that case, our approach was that we made detachable views. You can connect your tablet device or laptop to a larger screen, and you detach any view, bring it, drag it, and drop it on your own screen, and interact with the whole data set through your own screen. There are two examples here. You see in one view, the user has selected a scatter plot, and the other she has selected a power coordinate, but interacting through multiple link view with the large screen. The last example is that the user is using a cheap eye tracker for reordering access in power coordinates. So the other two were more about multivariate datasets and labeling. This one is more about reordering the access and information visualization. But our idea was to start something that later can be used for interacting with machine learning models also. So here, the user can interact by her eye to the screen. And based on the access that she has seen, we want to reorder them and put the access that she didn't visit to the middle. Maybe this shows it a bit better. You see a big circle on the screen when the user is interacting with it. And there is no mouse and keyboard involved, it's just eye tracker. And some of the access are actually being highlighted when the user is interacting with it. And our goal is to put the access that are not highlighted in the middle after the user manually clicked on a button. The user is exploring the dataset. As you can see, the left one is not explored, so we just put it on the middle. This is the version with the gaze inputs visualized with the heat map. And as you can see, the left one was D1, but we put it on the middle. The reason behind this is that because it is shown that the ones that are in the middle are usually better explored than the ones that are on the left or the right side of the power coordinate. And we assume that the user didn't explore them because it was not visually available. And then you see a picture of me with augmented reality glass for no particular reason. In fact, it is not even connected. But we plan to use them for the future work. So one of the directions that we can go is to use virtual reality and augmented reality. In fact, our colleagues in both Fraunhofer Singapore and Segefa are working on virtual reality right now, and to some extent augmented reality for data visualization. Another idea for future work is to have multi-class visual labeling. It would be very interesting to see even that in a collaborative multi-touch display. That was a suggestion of a colleague. Also, one thing that we didn't do enough, in my opinion, is to run user studies for multimodal interactions. That would definitely be beneficial for the scientific community. And also one good idea is to make a framework out of the implicit input users that the user is giving to us, for example, with eye tracking, with just exploring data sets. And with this framework, we come to conclusion on how to automatically guide the user to better interaction. So I would like to conclude my presentation with 4 hypotheses that we defined in the thesis and we proved in the thesis. First, we defined, the first question was that how we can use visual analytics to explore the models. We show it by a local pattern model being analyzed and explored by visual analytics. Then the second question was how you can use interactive visualization for building a machine learning model, visualized by MVs, and developing and testing it with two different use case scenarios. And in the third one, the hypothesis was that this creation can surpass active learning. We showed, in fact, with user studies, in some cases it can, maybe even in more cases, but we didn't do more user studies. And lastly, we showed that multi-touch displays and eye trackers can be beneficial for both information visualization and for improving interaction with machine learning models. The three key publications here that I would like to thank all the co-authors here, the ones that are presented now or the ones that are not. The three main key publications were in Eurovis, Visual Informatics, and FITEE. And the third one published recently, the first two ones has now 10 citations each. And we published 6 papers in conferences, workshops, and posters. And one of them got the Best Paper Award in IVET, I think. I would like to thank all of you for attention, for coming here. I would like to specifically thank TU Graz, Nanyang Technological University for providing me this opportunity, for Darmstadt, TU Graz funding that enabled me to go to Darmstadt and do part of my research there, for University of Rostock to host me 2 times actually, for TU Graz that provided me the fund to go to these 6-7 conferences, and a special thanks to Fraunhofer Austria and Singapore and IGD for hosting me and welcoming me to their institutes during this time. Thanks again. I'm available for any question.